Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. To start, I really want you to picture a man lying completely still on a cold stone table. He's been dead for exactly 4 days, and today, right now, a total stranger wearing this heavy, intimidating jackal mask is about to reach inside this man's body and pull his internal organs out one at a time with bare hands.
I know, it sounds literally like the setup for a horror movie, right? But no way, this isn't fiction. This is a visceral, incredibly physical reality. This exact scene happened to real people, hundreds of thousands of times, operating continuously over a span of more than 2,000 years.
You know, we've all probably seen mummies in museums, just resting peacefully behind reinforced glass, but the process to actually get them there was intensely disturbing. So what actually happened to a body once it died in ancient Egypt? Well, we're going to walk step by step through the brutal 70-day countdown to show you exactly how a human body was transformed. Let's look at the absolute foundation of this practice. Mummification, a 70-day preservation process to stop rot, considered absolutely necessary for a soul to survive in the afterlife. The crucial point here is that this wasn't just some cultural tradition or a nice sign of respect. The Egyptians believed that if your body rotted away, your soul would be lost in the afterlife forever. So the embalmers, who were essentially highly trained professionals acting as part doctor, part funeral worker, and part priest, they were leading a desperate bid for eternal survival.
Step 1. And honestly, the very first step they took on a fresh body might be the most shocking detail of the entire process. Delivered with clinical speed, they didn't gently cut open the skull. Instead, they took a long metal hook and literally hammered it up through the nose, breaking right through that thin bone at the back of the nasal cavity. Then, they would slowly pull the brain tissue out, bit by bit, right through the nostril.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate irony of ancient Egyptian medicine. Think about it. The brain you are using right now to listen to my voice and process this information was thrown in the trash. They thought it was literally just worthless packing material. But the heart was protected at all costs.
Egyptologist Salima Ikram from the American University in Cairo really hits the nail on the head here. They believed everything that makes you who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your personality, lived inside the heart. Embalmers were meticulously trained to guard it because it would eventually be weighed on an afterlife scale against a feather just to judge if you had lived a good life. Lose the heart and you lose your entire afterlife. Lose the brain, you lose nothing at all.
Sorting the organs, the left side incision. So after the brain was discarded, embalmers made a precise cut on the left abdomen to pull out the lungs, stomach, intestines, and liver. Every single one of these organs was washed and treated with natron, which is a naturally occurring moisture-drawing salt. And they weren't just tossed out. They were placed into 4 specific canopic jars, each guarded by a different animal-headed god. These are known together as the 4 sons of Horus. You've got a jackal for the stomach, a baboon for the lungs. These gods were supposed to stand watch over those specific body parts for thousands of years inside a sealed tomb. Okay, 40 days of drying. Let's just slow down here to feel the heavy endurance of this next phase. The empty body, completely hollowed out of its major organs, was packed and completely covered in that natron salt and then just left alone. It wasn't soaked in a liquid. It was genuinely left to dry out completely, transforming from soft human flesh into something closely resembling tough leather for 40 excruciating days.
What actually happens during those 40 days is fascinating. Moisture is violently pulled from the muscle, the skin, the connective tissue. This stops the tiny decay-causing bacteria dead in its tracks, which basically causes the flesh to shrink directly onto the bone. And this isn't just ancient mythology either. Modern forensic scientists, like the researchers at the University of York, have actually recreated this ancient embalming method using donated bodies, and it proved that ancient natron salt is shockingly effective at halting decay almost completely, even by today's scientific standards.
Now, because the body had shrunken so drastically during those 40 days of drying out like meat in the sun, it looked completely collapsed. So the embalmers actually had to physically stuff it back into a lifelike shape. They packed the empty body cavity with linen and sawdust. They inserted false stone or glass eyes into the sockets just to keep the face from looking hollow. Modern radiologists like Sahar Salim at Cairo University have used modern scanning technology and even discovered small onions and seed packets hidden inside these ancient chest cavities to restore that human shape.
Wrapping the body, layers of protection.
And this brings us to the part you instantly recognize from popular culture, the painstaking wrapping process. But it wasn't just tossing some quick bandages on, not at all. This took days of careful, focused labor. Embalmers used literally hundreds of yards of linen strips. Every single finger and toe was individually wrapped first to preserve its exact shape. Then they painted layers of sticky tree resin, kind of like a heavy varnish, between the linen to lock out moisture and physically seal the body from decay. And as they wrapped, they strategically tucked in protective religious amulets.
One of the absolute most vital amulets was the Heart Scarab. They would tuck this golden beetle amulet right over the physical heart. Why? Well, because it was inscribed with a magical spell begging the heart not to testify against its owner during that critical afterlife judgment. It's almost as if the embalmers didn't fully trust the heart to cooperate and stay quiet on its own, so they installed a magical backup plan. Pretty clever, right?
When you step back and put it all together, the progression is just staggering. From death and the brain extraction on day 1, to the organs in jars on day 4, the end of the grueling salt drying on day 44, all the way to the finished wrapping on day 70. That is 70 full days of cutting, stuffing, and wrapping a human being who used to be someone's mother, father, or child. It's a staggering amount of sustained effort.
Now, pause for a second, because here's a twist that completely changes how you should think about everything we just covered.
You might be thinking this intense 70-day surgical gauntlet was a rare one-off ritual just for a lone king or pharaoh. Well, archaeological evidence shows this was actually a massive commercialized industry. It had skilled professionals, specialized workshops, and established pricing tiers. So even regular everyday people could afford simpler versions. It operated non-stop for over 2,000 years, literally giving millions of people a shot at immortality.
Contrast this ancient masterpiece of science with modern burials. Today, our bodies receive none of this immense effort. Modern burials just aren't designed for long-term preservation. In most cases, we're destined to completely vanish without a trace in just a few centuries. Meanwhile, the Egyptian process was so phenomenally successful that scientists today can scan them, study their teeth, and still identify the specific diseases that killed them thousands of years ago.
It's so easy to see the brain hooks and the salt and think of it as barbaric. But in reality, this entire brutal, smelly 70-day ordeal was actually a profound act of love. It was driven by a civilization that was utterly terrified of being erased from existence. They weren't destroying a body, they were desperately trying to save a person's chance at continuing to exist at all.
Being made permanent. So the next time you see a mummy behind glass, perfectly still, looking almost peaceful, remember the brutal 70 days that came before that stillness. The hooks, the jars, the drying out in the salt. Ask yourself, isn't it absolutely incredible that out of pure defiance against death, using an exact understanding of their own science, they actually succeeded in making themselves permanent? What lengths would we go to today if we truly believed that preserving our physical bodies was the only way to save our existence?